In the shadows of Black Pine Ridge, a monster took a bride. But what the town feared most was only the beginning. Welcome to Frontier Nights. The day Mara signed her name to marry Silas Thorne, the entire town of Ashford whispered that she would be dead within a year. They said he was a monster, a man who lived alone on Black Pine Ridge, who broke horses with his bare hands, and who once put 3 men in the hospital for trespassing on his land. Now, 19-year-old Mara Voss, whose father had just lost everything in a haze of bad decisions and mounting debts, was being delivered to his door like payment on a loan. But what the town didn't know was this: Silas Thorne wasn't the villain in this story. He was a man carrying wounds deeper than the scars on his face. A man who had learned the hard way that the world took more than it gave. Stay with me until the end. The courthouse steps were slick with April rain when Mara arrived. She wore her mother's old gray dress, the one with buttons down the back that no longer lined up perfectly after years of wear. The fabric felt heavy against her skin, damp from the drizzle, and she pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Her father, Thomas Voss, walked beside her, but he wasn't really there. His eyes were hollow, his shoulders slumped under the weight of guilt. He had stopped being truly present 3 weeks earlier, right around the time the bank seized the family farm. "You don't have to do this," he said for the 4th time that morning, his voice cracking slightly. Mara didn't answer. They both knew it was a lie. The wagon rattled to a stop in front of the courthouse, and Judge Carver was already waiting on the steps, rain dripping off the brim of his wide hat. He looked at her the way one might look at a lamb being led to slaughter, sad, but not sad enough to intervene. "Miss Voss," he said gravely, "you're certain about this? I'm here, aren't I?" Mara replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Behind her, the town had gathered in small clusters, murmuring under their umbrellas and coats. They hadn't come to celebrate. They came to watch the girl whose father had gambled away the family farm get handed over to the meanest man in 3 counties. Silas Thorne. Even his name sounded sharp, like the edge of a blade. Mara had seen him exactly twice in her life. Once at the general store when she was 14, where he bought rope and nails without speaking a single word to anyone. The second time at the county fair, where he'd outbid everyone on a black stallion known to have killed 1 man already. He was tall and broad, built like the mountain itself, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes that didn't pretend to be kind. The town said he'd been in a mining accident years ago, that it had scarred him inside and out. That he didn't like people, didn't trust them, and certainly didn't need them. And now Mara was about to become his wife. "He's here," someone whispered. The crowd parted like water around a rock. Silas came up the courthouse steps alone. No family, no friends, just him in a black coat that looked older than Mara herself, his boots caked with mud from the mountain trails. He didn't glance at the crowd or acknowledge the whispers. He looked only at her. For a long moment neither spoke. Up close, he was even more imposing. The scar running from his left eyebrow down to his jaw was old and faded to white, pulling his expression into something that might have been anger or simply emptiness. Rain traced lines down his face. "You ready?" he asked. His voice was low and rough, like gravel under wagon wheels, but not cruel. "Do I have a choice?" Mara replied quietly. Something flickered across his face, perhaps regret, perhaps nothing at all. "No," he said honestly. Judge Carver cleared his throat. "Shall we?" Inside the courthouse, the air smelled of wet wood and old paper. Mara's hands trembled, so she hid them in the folds of her dress. Her father stood to her left, Silas to her right. The judge read from a worn book that had probably joined hundreds of couples who had actually wanted to be there. Do you, Silas Thorne, take this woman to be your wife? I do. He didn't wait for the full question, cutting through it like signing a contract rather than a vow. Judge Carver blinked. And do you, Mara Voss, take this man to be your husband? I do. Her voice came out steadier than expected. Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you man and wife. There was no kiss, no applause. Silas pulled a plain silver ring from his coat pocket and slid it onto her finger. It was too big. Mara closed her hand into a fist to keep it from slipping off. That's it, the judge said softly. You're married. Outside, the rain had intensified. Silas walked to his wagon, an old, sturdy thing that looked like it had survived wars, and held out a hand. Mara ignored it and climbed up herself. If she was going to face whatever waited on Black Pine Ridge, she would do it on her own terms. Her father stood on the steps looking smaller than ever. Mara couldn't bring herself to look at him. Silas snapped the reins, and the wagon lurched forward. The 2-hour ride up the mountain was silent. Mara watched the town disappear behind them, replaced by thick forests where trees grew taller and closer together. The road was little more than a muddy track, and twice the wagon nearly slid off the edge. Silas handled the horses with calm confidence, a man who had made this journey countless times. Finally, Mara broke the quiet. How far up do you live? Far enough. That's not an answer. He glanced at her. You'll see. Another 20 minutes passed before the trees opened into a clearing. Black Pine Ridge came into view. It wasn't the crude cabin she had imagined. The house was large, 2 stories of dark wood with a wide porch wrapping around the front, and a stone chimney sending smoke into the gray sky. Behind it, the mountain rose like a protective wall, pines so dense they formed an impenetrable green barrier. To the left, Mara spotted the dark mouth of a mine entrance supported by heavy timbers. Silas stopped the wagon and climbed down. This time, Mara accepted his hand. His grip was strong and callous, but he released her the moment her feet touched the ground. This is it, he said simply. It's big, Mara observed. I built it myself. Why'd build something so large for one person? He didn't answer, instead grabbing her single bag and heading inside. The house was warm. A fire crackled in the large stone fireplace, filling the air with the scent of wood smoke and fresh coffee. The furniture was simple and sturdy, clearly handmade. Everything was clean and orderly. Silas set her bag by the stairs. Your room's upstairs. Second door on the left. Mara blinked. My room? You got a problem with that? I just thought. She trailed off. Thought what? He pressed, crossing his arms. Nothing. Say it. She met his eyes. I thought you'd expect me to share yours. For a long moment, Silas stared at her. Then he turned to the fire, adding a log that didn't need it. I didn't marry you for that, he said without looking back. Then why did you marry me? Because your father owed Victor Hale $8,000. Hale said he'd forgive the debt if I took you off his hands. Silas turned around. So here we are. Mara's stomach dropped. Victor Hale, the powerful banker, had arranged this. Silas hadn't chosen her. She was part of a transaction. The first week passed in tense, silent routine. Silas left before dawn for the mine or timber stands, returning at dusk covered in dirt or sawdust. He washed at the outdoor pump before dinner. Mara cooked because there was little else to do, and they ate in near silence. He never touched her, never even brushed against her in passing. At night, she heard him moving downstairs, tending the fire or fixing things that didn't need fixing. Sometimes he sat on the porch for hours, staring into the darkness with a rifle across his lap. On the 8th day, Mara discovered the locked room at the end of the hall. The heavy iron lock looked untouched for years. She tried the handle. "Don't." Silas stood at the top of the stairs, watching her. "I wasn't." "Yes, you were." He walked past her. "That door stays locked." "Why?" "Because I said so." "That's not a reason." Silas stopped. "What's in there is none of your business. You've got the rest of the house. Leave it alone." 2 days later, while searching the shed for firewood, Mara knocked over a crate. Papers spilled out, letters, ledgers, documents. She found records of her father's debts. The amounts didn't add up. Victor Hale had doubled the debt arbitrarily. A ledger entry showed the arrangement: debt forgiven upon Mara's marriage to Silas, with the Ridge transferring to the bank upon Silas's death or default. She confronted him in the shed. "I found these," she said, holding up the ledger. "Hale lied about the debt." "You knew?" "I figured it out soon after the wedding." "What good would telling you have done? You were already here. The deal kept you from starving." Mara's world tilted. She wasn't just a wife. She was bait in a larger trap. Victor Hale wanted the mountain for the railroad route it blocked. Killing Silas or Mara would clear the path. That night, they talked on the porch. Silas revealed more: the railroad's interest, Hale's schemes, the loss that had broken him years earlier. Mara began to see the man beneath the rumors. She waited until he left the next day, then picked the lock on the forbidden room. Inside was a nursery, crib, rocking chair, tiny shoes, and a photograph of a younger Silas smiling beside a woman with kind eyes holding a baby. His wife Sarah and daughter Emma. Silas caught her there. "Get out." She left, but the truth haunted her. Later Caleb, an older man who worked the timber crew, visited and shared the story. The mine collapsed 7 years ago that killed Sarah and Emma. Silas had survived but lost everything that mattered. Mara found more letters in the room, including correspondence between Silas and her father. Silas had tried to help Thomas before the forced marriage. There was also a loan contract with Hale that put the Ridge at risk. Tensions escalated. Mara confronted Hale in town after visiting her broken father, only to be taken hostage. Silas rescued her at gunpoint. They returned to the Ridge, forging an uneasy alliance against the common enemy. Winter brought isolation and threats. When Hale's men came to burn them out during a snowstorm, Caleb revealed himself as a retired federal marshal with warrants. A confrontation ensued. Silas shot Hale in the shoulder to stop him from drawing. The banker was arrested, his schemes exposed thanks to the ledger Mara had found. In church weeks later, Silas publicly acknowledged their marriage and deeded land to Mara in her own name. He asked her, before the town, if she would choose him. She said yes. Rebuilding followed, literal and emotional. Fires set by Hale's associates tested them, but they fought back with evidence and community support. The trial in Denver exposed the corruption. Hale escaped briefly, leading to a final desperate attack on the Ridge. In a fierce gunfight, with the house burning, Mara, Silas, and Caleb held their ground until the posse arrived. Hale was killed in the struggle. Months of healing followed. The house was rebuilt larger, the timber operation restored, and an apple orchard planted on the eastern slope as a symbol of hope for the future. Mara discovered she was pregnant. Their love, born from necessity, deepened into something real and chosen. They renewed their vows on the mountain with friends and family present. A daughter named Hope was born the following spring. The orchard grew, the community healed, and Black Pine Ridge transformed from a place of ghosts and isolation into a true home. Years later, Mara would stand among the apple trees, picking fruit with her daughter at her feet and Silas working nearby. She bit into an apple, tart, sweet, perfect, and reflected on their journey. What began as a forced union amid debt and danger had become a life built on courage, trust, and quiet strength. They had chosen each other every day, planting seeds for futures they might not fully see, believing tomorrow could be better. And in the end, it was. The mountain stood tall and enduring, much like their bond. Bad things would always come, but they faced them together. That made all the difference.